Today we're talking slope noses, and I don't mean mine. We're talking 935 Porsches on today's episode of Staging Lane.
You know, I never saw the 935 for like 10 years. It was like 10 years until the thing had come out, and then I saw one. And I the first thing I thought was, this is an odd-looking vehicle. We've talked about this before on episodes where it's styled like the Senna's. You know, it's styled to achieve a goal. And that's what they did with this car. Because I actually heard of this car first when someone had said Moby Dick.
Yeah.
And I said Moby Dick, and I said the whale, and it was a Porsche guy, and he almost pushed me off the pier. And I said, no. He said, no, it's a Porsche. And I said, well, what are you talking about? And then I got to doing some research on it, because I like to be a car guy. I like to know this stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And I had no idea how crazy and dominant that this car was.
It really was.
Yeah.
I mean, factory-built race car. So it was for the 911 Turbo. This was the factory race car version of it, was the 935. And just like you had said, I had seen it in pictures. I knew what it was, but I didn't understand it until I started researching it once this came across our desk. And it's just, wow.
And the more research you do on this car, the more you really realize how innovative and crazy it was. Because this car raced in what was called Group 5. Mm-hmm. And there's silhouette rules, meaning that it just had to look like the car. You know what I mean? So they got a little nutty with this car.
Because the only thing original was the chassis from the 911.
And then after that, they started adding pipe to it and changing all that around. And so it did get pretty crazy on this thing. They had a problem with it. I know they're trying to stay air cooled. This car pushed Porsche to start going towards water cooled engines. And I know everybody says, oh, it's a bummer that they lost the air cooled engine, but performance levels were getting higher and higher, and air can only do so much for getting rid of heat. After a while, you need a liquid in there to really pull the heat out, because air can't extricate like water can, and that's what they found out with this car.
Yep. Water-cooled cylinder heads, air-cooled block.
Yeah, real cool, real innovative, something they could put together fast, because they needed to put something together fast because this engine was making crazy power.
Metzger engine.
But what's really cool was that with this car is that they spent a lot of time on bolt-on aerodynamic devices. Yeah. And the first time that I really saw some, I hate to say you use the word bolt-on, but was when they did the long tails back in the 60s with the long tail 917s. Mm-hmm. And they said, wow, I've got this big long extension trying to get all that mile per hour. But obviously, the problem they had with that is that created a lot of lift. Yeah, it lifted the back end of the car right up when it would get going really fast. So then that's when they came out with the cam back, where they extended that shape by focusing the air in that same direction. And it had basically the same effect. It wasn't as good, but it was close enough that it also didn't create the lift problems. Yeah. This vehicle, if you look at it visually, you'd think it was an aerodynamic mess. And we've talked about the Apollo episode where you look at that thing visually and you go, wow, I can't believe that all that can work, because it looks too messy. You know what I mean?
All the sharp angles in it.
Yeah,
and stuff.
Anytime you put air through a lot of things that it has to do, it starts picking up little turbulent areas and areas where it'll make the wings stall and just do odd things. And this has a lot of kind of loopy stuff, especially towards the back, where you can see that they bolted all this stuff on the back, but there's still the real car back in there.
Yep, so tucked back in there.
Yeah, tucked back in there. So it was really cool that they did, and they did make it work. And it really worked. This thing was 228 miles per hour this was going at Le Mans.
9-second quarter miles. 0 to 60 in like 3.3 seconds. That's insane for a 70s car, late 70s car.
This did a 9-second quarter mile?
9-second quarter mile at 143 miles an hour.
Whoa.
That's insane.
That was really, really... See, mile per hour is a really good indicator of horsepower level. You take something like this, pushing that wing, if you took the wings off that car, it would be at least 3-4 miles per hour faster. So this is easily an 800 horsepower uncorrected engine putting down that kind of number.
Yeah, which is funny you bring that up, because just doing the research for this, initially in 76 when they first came up with the 935, it was a single turbo, making around 590 horsepower.
Okay.
And then in 70, and then it went to a twin turbo 630. So they went from single to twin turbo. And then in 78, at 700 horsepower. And the last I heard that the Moby Dick version had around 800 to 850 horsepower.
Yeah.
So, and I
that's
mean,
when
even
they
guys
started
nowadays are
burning head
driving it
gaskets and all that stuff. Oh yeah.
and just dominating
That's
the track
cool.
with that thing
And
too.
thinking of getting hot, I need a drink.
Cue the whiskey, girl.
So we talked about this thing just dominating the racetrack. I mean, originally for that Group 5 racing, their goal was to win at Le Mans. And they did, and finally in '79 they won the 24-hour Le Mans, which at the same year they won Daytona as well.
Oh, I didn't know they won Daytona that
Yeah,
year.
'79 as well. They won Daytona, which is pretty neat. But I heard that not the other Porsche race car guys that were racing their cars were getting upset because the Moby Dick version from the factory from Porsche was just dominating it.
Well, Porsche did some sneaky stuff with this Moby Dick. They realized that they needed this car lower. But there was a lot involved with just lowering the chassis because you got to move all the pickup points and everything else in order to do that. So what they did was they cut the body and dropped the body on the chassis 4 inches.
Oh, wow.
So that they didn't have to redesign all the pickup points on this front suspension because they had that stuff dialed in. Then what they did was flip the transmission upside down. Yeah, so that they could pick up that. So that would be proper with the CV joints on it. So they'd fix that. And no one knew that. And so that was the thing, is that Moby Dick goes out, and I think they only ran like 3 races with that as a factory car, the Moby Dick car. But when it showed up at Silverstone in '76, I think it was, when they showed up at Silverstone with that car, it was 2 seconds a lap faster than everything else that was out there. So there was really no stopping that car. I think he won it by like 6 or 7 laps. It was a really big.
He did, 7 laps.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Because if you're a half a second faster than everyone else, and
that's saying something.
Exactly, and you run 20 laps, you got a 10-second lead. These guys are 2 seconds a lap faster. And I don't know if you've ever driven race cars before, but if you have, and you go out and qualify, and you go out and you run a certain lap time and on a 2.5-second lap, and somebody says, hey, you got a good gap, slow down 2 seconds. Wow, that's a lot of slowing down. I mean, you're really breaking 100 feet earlier, and everything else. You're really saving the car. So they went out and still put 7 laps on everybody, which wasn't a very good move because, like, I'll develop race cars for people, and I've talked to you about this before, where we'll go out and I've done some things for Chevrolet and Dodge and all those things for race teams, and it'd be secret stuff that we'd come up with, and you'd keep it quiet for as long as you could. But you'd tell the guys, and I'm looking at you, Justin Bell, you know what I'm talking about, the Rolex 24. You say, hey, we've got this humongous advantage. Don't go out there and just clobber the heck out of everybody. Let's just take it easy and just go fast enough to win. But if you know anything about the Bell family, they don't know what slow is. It's just wide open throttle and away we go. So it was the Rolex 24 we developed this really cool thing for, and they went out and just clobbered the whole field, qualifying this Corvette #1 ahead of even the Daytona prototypes, which IMSA goes up in arms, contacted me and said, hey, what's this crazy thing that you got? And I go, hey, you wrote the rules. I said, that thing's legal. We had like 40 or 50 horsepower on the field. And so they said, yeah, that's not going to be legal next time. So when you come up with crazy stuff like this Moby Dick car, don't go out and run 2 seconds a lap faster than everybody else, and don't put 7 laps on the field because they're immediately going to come down on you and crush your advantage.
Yeah.
And they did that with this car, but the car was so much further ahead of everyone else that you can crush it, but after a while you're going to have to start having them drag sandbags.
Yeah.
So you can't slow down a car that's this innovative and this forward thinking. And although they tried, nobody could run with them.
And speaking of crushing, which I thought was the thing that we're constantly talking about too with these race cars, is that especially back in the days, the engineering that people would do they read the rule book and they found ways either around them or that weren't stated, which is innovative. I think that's what's awesome about it. That's how technology keeps getting forward. Aluminum roll cage.
Oh, I didn't know that
All
either.
these cars had aluminum roll cages. Speaking of crushing, that's not going to help you in any way. Now, it made the car really light and crazy fast, and it passed the regulations that you had to have a roll cage in there, but it's not going to say it's not driver safety, that's for sure.
Yeah, I wonder because when you got these cars from Porsche, I think the factory cars probably had the aluminum roll cages, but I think that later on when they were, you know what, is there an alarm going off? As you can see, some people aren't as good as driving as they should be. We've all been in the car with that one guy that says, hey, I saw this on a cartoon once. I think I can do it. This car is one of those cars that it's so mechanical, it's so insanely fast, 228 mile an hour and 2,000 pounds, that you could get yourself in serious trouble with this car.
Quickly, yeah.
But in the history of this car, as violent and crazy as this car is, it doesn't have a history of being problematic. It seems to have a good finishing record. It seems to be, no one complained about a crazy driving style. When they came out with the 917s, those cars were 220 mile an hour back then, and Brian Redmond talked about just hoping the engine would explode so they didn't have to run the race.
I remember hearing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And no one said that about this car, and this car was going even faster than those were, and was lighter or in the same ballpark as far as weight goes. So it must be really sorted out.
Oh, yeah, it has to be. And another thing I heard, too, is that depending on the tracks they were at, they would actually, because the turbos were sitting down, behind that back bumper, you could really see them right there, they would take the twin turbos off and do it as a single turbo, depending on the track.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yep. They said for some endurance races and things like that, they would actually just go to a single because it was more efficient.
We do manufacture the turbos we build turbos for a lot of Porsches. You get the twin turbo Porsches. You do a ton of those. And if you've driven those older Porsches from the 70s and stuff, there was so much turbo lag in those things. I mean, just wow, because we'll upgrade them to titanium impellers and stuff, so they'll spool up faster to kill that lag. But I had driven one when I first was getting into Porsches, and I went out and took one for a drive, and punch it down, you're used to it to go, and it was just nothing. And then, wow, it just hits you like a ton of bricks.
Like the hand of God is just pushing you.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And I just thought, wow, I mean, that's something that you have to get used to. So I see why they went to the single turbo, because they would definitely spool up a lot faster and get rid of all that lag, especially on like the shorter tracks. You could have instant on, off. When they decided after this few races with the Moby Dick car, the factory decided they weren't going to run that anymore. And then later on, I think it was by about 1981, the factory decided, well, we don't want to sell the Evo versions of this car. We're just going to sell the prints and the parts to Reinhold Jost and the Kramer brothers.
Kramer.
Yeah, they were the two guys that would assemble these cars. You'd get a Porsche, and then you put all these 935 parts on them. And they gave the prints out for the Moby Dick car so that they could know all the little sneaky stuff that they had done to make it faster, so that they would be up to speed really cool. And that's a cool thing that Porsche does. I mean, because Porsche, they're not poser racers. They're real racers at Porsche. So when they said, hey, we're going to sell you all the parts, you guys can build this car yourself, they also gave away their tricks. And that's really cool for a company to give away their racing tricks, because all that translates.
You ain't going to get that in F1, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah. No, you're not. You're just saying, here's your parts, and the guy says, why is it a second slower than my stuff? Well, that's for you to figure out.
And you got to return them when you're done.
Yeah, that's for you to figure out. But they did a fantastic job with this car, and it's just one of those cars that it helped Porsche evolve so much faster from I don't want to say, this wasn't a prehistoric, the original 911, but it was really starting to fall behind the times. And when they came out with this, it gave them a platform where they could just start bringing innovation in and changing things and really moving forward. And the Moby Dick car was probably the one car that moved them forward. This whole 935 deal, if you take a look at it, it's obviously completely forward-thinking. It's like, I don't care too much about styling, because it's a good-looking car if if you're into that kind of thing.
Right.
But as far as styling goes, I mean, you're not going to see, it's not going to impress people with these beautiful flowing lines, because it's not about that. I mean, that wing and different iterations of that wing in the rear were just horrendous looking.
Yeah, because the Moby Dick was like really the final version of it with that big swooping back piece.
Yeah.
And Busy Mode is actually recreating one right now. And the drawings are not drawings, but the 3D visualizations they've done of it look beautiful. It's going to be all electric, but I can't wait to see that thing when it's done. Oh, one thing real quick that I thought that you might like. You know how wide these back tires are?
No,
15 inches. 15 inches wide. So
15. Oh, it's got a big amount of rubber on the car.
19 inches around, 15 inches wide. So I figured you'd like that. Since he likes
Finally
the big
got
tires.
some big tires. But Porsche's been known. Porsche is one of those companies that's not afraid to put a big tire on the car. And with that in mind, I think it's time. I hear a squealing noise.
So as far as styling, I think this is a beautiful looking car in a sense because it does have that, that huge slope nose that you wouldn't even give it two looks of it unless you understood all of this history that it has. 150 career wins, type of motor that's in it, 800 horsepower, So to me, the styling of this, I actually gave it a pretty high styling because I'm thinking back in the days. I'm not comparing it to anything that's out nowadays, obviously. I actually gave it a 77.
I'm really surprised because Tony's a big Porsche guy. He really likes them a lot. So I'm really surprised that he really looked at it for what it is. But I have a problem in that because you're giving it a styling rating, and you can't do that with this car because this car is not a stylish car. There's nothing stylish. There's nothing cool about this car whatsoever. Now, in the cool as insert your favorite expletive range, I give it a 75.
Okay.
But I'm going to screw you up now.
Okay, yeah.
But in the real styling range, the car's a 45.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that.
Right.
More of the Tony V likes it
Yeah,
for
yeah,
78.
yeah, absolutely.
But to a normal person, I totally agree with you. They would never give it two looks.
In performance, though, this car is going to really surprise everyone on this. Because I know, of course, you got to remember, this is 850 horsepower back in the 70s, which is crazy, crazy, crazy.
And keep in mind, that was also going back to all the gas fuel price problems that we're having.
Oh, yeah.
And so they were limiting motors and all kinds of stuff back
and
then.
this thing only got 4.5 miles per gallon when it was running on the tracks. I mean, this thing was sucking some fuel.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But most race cars today, they run in the 4.5 to 5.5 mile per gallon range anyways. But I was surprised that a turbo engine back in that day could get that kind of mileage because that's really good fuel mileage back in that day because they used to have to throw so much extra fuel in them to keep them cool. But obviously cooling the heads down really solved that. Probably picked them up a lot in fuel mileage. So in performance, 2,000 pounds plus a driver, 228 mile an hour, I gave it a 90.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, that is surprising because when I was writing down my numbers, I was like, mine's a little bit too high. But for everything that you said, I actually backed it with an 80.
Oh, okay. So we're right in the same ballpark.
Same
with
ballpark.
An 85 average, I'm thrilled with that. As a matter of fact, I'll drink to that. And congratulations, Porsche. You got a toast. Well, thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. And you know what they say, if you have an opinion that's different than ours, keep it to yourself.